I don't talk about the Xbox a lot on this channel, and while I can assure you that it's not out of any sort of brand favoritism, after all, my steadfast position is that the industry is always at its best when everyone is doing well, and more importantly, pushing each other to do well. Generally speaking, it's because Microsoft's games division really hasn't given me much to talk about since the channel became active again toward the end of 2022. Or, frankly, for several years prior to that if we're being brutally honest. Xbox has the stature of a big three platform holder, but next to its contemporaries, it's just sort of there. Not doing much of anything as Sony gradually accumulates a modest list of PS5 exclusives, and Nintendo continues their march toward owning the best-selling game console of all time in the Switch. However, for once, the Xbox is finding itself in the news cycle, if for dubious reasons, and that's what I'm here to talk about today. This is Little Akiba Games, I'm Patrick, welcome back to the shop. I've been an Xbox Series X owner for about 2.5 years now, and frankly friends, I still don't know what it's actually for. It's a big black lump sitting in my entertainment center that I occasionally use to play games that I could just as easily find on the PlayStation 5 or PC, but I ended up with an Xbox copy of instead, usually because it was cheaper. Hell, I just recently got a new copy of Grid Legends for $12 that way. The Xbox is an outstanding system if you're looking for bargains on physical software that's been out for a while, I'll certainly give it that. Every time I rack my brain wondering why I actually have mine, it ultimately comes down to backward compatibility. The only thing the Xbox Series flexes on the PC and PlayStation is its playable library of Xbox and Xbox 360 games, and I guess the small handful of Xbox One exclusives that were accumulated before Phil Spencer decided that he'd rather join hands around the campfire with his counterparts at Sony, Nintendo, and Valve singing Kumbaya than make a bid to actually compete with them. Don't get me wrong, I like Phil Spencer. He's one of the most genuine people in the industry, and it's nice to see someone who is so clearly one of us in a position of prime influence at one of the big three platform holders. Compared to a combative prick like the departing Jim Ryan, who set out on an almost cartoonish vendetta to derail Microsoft's purchase of Activision every step of the way, simply because he felt that doing so was tantamount to good stewardship of the PlayStation brand, give me the dedicated gamer who's amicable to a fault every time. The problem is that Spencer's good nature often compromises his own stewardship of the Xbox brand. By not having a single genuine exclusive land on the Xbox Series in its 3 years plus on the market, he's also giving Sony permission to coast by with 1 or 2 exclusives a year, if that. Without strong and honest competition, platform holders don't even have to try, and the results are actively defining the 9th gen, much to its detriment, most clearly evidenced by Sony's own admission that they have no major titles lined up for this fiscal year. Once upon a time, that would have been inexcusable, unimaginable even. Why did we buy these consoles again? I say all this to set up the proper frame for the dialogue that surrounded Microsoft's recent business disclosure podcast in the build-up to it. There was a lot of hype around them going the way of Sega, pulling the Xbox hardware from the market, and focusing on PlayStation and Switch development. Now the reality is, nothing that interesting could possibly happen in today's game industry because all 3 major platform holders, and I've said this before, are all so big that even a commercial failure of Dreamcast proportions is not enough to knock them out of their positions as platform holders, as we saw with the Wii U, which objectively performed even worse. It eventually outsold the Dreamcast, but it took longer to do it than the Dreamcast was even on the market. All 3 are literally too big to fail. Not in the same sense as the banks for whom the term was coined, too big for governments to let fail for fear of the broader consequences, but actually so big and their risks so minimal that there is not an L they can take that is big enough to pry them out of their market positions. Anyone who tries telling you otherwise is exploiting you with an interesting story for clicks. It would likely take 3 consecutive Dreamcast or Wii U situations to even threaten any of them, and that's no exaggeration. If anything, I'm underselling how safe they are. Their war chests are all overflowing to the point that they have the sheer liquid capital to withstand such downturns unfazed. Of course, the podcast finally rolled around, and Microsoft announced their intentions of sharing 4 titles, later revealed to be Grounded, Pentiment, Hi-Fi Rush, and Sea of Thieves, with their alleged competitors as a sort of testing ground. Now, why Killer Instinct was not involved in this initiative is beyond me, as Microsoft just recently bought fresh new servers for it, added cross-platform play so that Steam players can join Xbox and Windows Store players, and even funded a balance patch to re-energize the game's competitive scene. Adding PlayStation and Switch players to the game's community would have been a logical next step, so much so that it's genuinely shocking that it wasn't a part of this experiment. But I digress. Due to their apparent distaste for exclusives, Microsoft has engineered a situation where, although the Xbox Series is getting a steady diet of new releases all the time, Xbox Game Pass is regarded as the class of online services in the game industry. The system's only unique job, the only thing that it and only it brings to the market, is the ability to play a small handful of games from previous Xbox consoles with all the benefits of modern HD and solid-state media. Once the legacy Xbox and Xbox 360 emulation communities up their collective game, which is only ever a matter of time when it comes to emulation, the Xbox Series won't actually be for much of anything. I say all this to pose the question: what if the worst case scenario had come to pass and Microsoft did, in fact, exit the hardware game? Every game from its native library can already be found on the PC, PlayStation 5, or Xbox One. Probably even more platforms in a lot of cases. And the backward-compatible titles would be a good incentive for the emulation developers to double down on their own efforts to preserve those classic libraries for the future. From the moment it became possible to play Sonic Adventure on the GameCube, any remaining surreal qualities of a flagship IP moving over to another company's platform dissolved into thin air. Halo, Fable, Forza, or Gears of War on the Switch or PlayStation is hardly unthinkable. Thanks to Microsoft's own practices diminishing the weight of Xbox's presence in the market, it already feels like an inevitability. In the end, I'm glad Microsoft's announcement was ultimately, as other YouTubers have called it, a nothing burger, but it's also unfortunate that it inspires valid questions of exactly what Microsoft contributes to the console market at all in 2024. I would far prefer a situation where even the credible suggestion that Microsoft was potentially on the way out of the console market carried with it a genuine fear of tangible loss. When the Xbox is strong, it forces PlayStation to step up its own offerings, and we all benefit from that as gamers. What we're seeing right now, and the main reason 9th Gen has been such a drag nearly 3.5 years in, is just a result of a console landscape without real competition. Losing the Xbox, serious questions about the fate of our Xbox purchase histories aside, and we would have to have that conversation if it actually came to that, the gaming industry as we know it would just keep on keeping on. The world would keep on turning completely undisturbed because Microsoft has done nothing to make the Xbox Series important to the market. Sony's PlayStation division wouldn't have to adjust a thing because they've been allowed to operate as if they have no direct competitors for years at this point. And it shows. The discourse surrounding the third-party Xbox initiative is just shining a rather bright light on that greater problem. However, when you look at it like that, all the console partisan content creators, the PlayStation fanboys who were circle-jerking over the impending final victory over a rival of over 2 decades, and the Xbox fanboys who were oozing doom and gloom over the perceived imminent loss of the brand they had rallied behind for, in many cases, just as long, looks rather silly, doesn't it? The status quo would be the exact same the next day. If the possibility had emerged 15 or even just 10 years ago, the potential removal of Microsoft from the console market would rock the industry to its foundations, especially given the 360 being the 360. Today, though, it just ain't that deep. Not even close. As someone who is above all of that console partisanship, I find it amusing. As someone who would prefer a hyper-competitive game industry where all platform holders are falling all over themselves to give us their best, it's pretty deeply concerning. That's all for now. If you like this video, then please let YouTube know all about it with your likes, comments, shares, and especially subscribes. There's still that goal in place of building the channel up to 1,000 subscribers by the end of 2024. Click the notification bell if you want to know right away when the next video drops. I look forward to seeing you back here next time at Little Akiba Games.